Greetings and welcome to Illinois in Focus Weekend Edition, powered by the Center Square. I'm Greg Bishop, Illinois editor at Franklin News Foundation, publisher of the Center Square Newswire service. This week, for Illinois in Focus, the Center Square reporter Jim Talamonte and I will discuss Illinois' role in the ongoing Texas remap debates, and the latest chapter closing in the ComEd 4 corruption trial, and what could be coming down the line for the looming transit fiscal cliff. All of that and more when we return for more Illinois in Focus.
Some people would call him a loser. He ran for state office. He was beaten. He started a business. He failed. He ran for Congress. He lost. He was nominated for vice president. He lost again. But he knew only those who never tried are the real losers. And Abraham Lincoln was no loser. Persistence. Pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at values.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. This week's news has been dominated here in Illinois by Texas Democrats fleeing the Lone Star State to avoid voting on new legislative and congressional district maps out of Texas that could give Republicans an advantage. How's Illinois been playing in this? I'm Greg Bishop. Thank you for being back with us. And we're joined now by the Center Square's Jim Talamonte. Jim, Sunday night late, we got the news that Texas Democrats were meeting up with Governor J.B. Pritzker somewhere in the Chicago suburbs, and they were holding a news conference. That started what has been now a week-long story about Texas maps. What is going on here?
Yeah, it's interesting. We have Texas Democrats finding sanctuary in a sanctuary state, just as many migrants did, non-citizen migrants, when they arrived here, especially that big flood from Venezuela a couple of years ago. But this is an attempt to escape taking a vote on new maps in Texas that likely would give Texas Republicans an advantage. And, of course, the irony, Greg, is that here in Illinois, we have some of the most gerrymandered maps anywhere in the country, probably anywhere in the world, really, if you look at it, because if you look at Illinois congressional maps, Illinois State House and State Senate district maps, I mean, it's the jigsaw puzzle would be almost impossible to assemble if you handed all the pieces. That's how crazy these maps are. So, Texas, at least currently, certainly doesn't have such crazy maps, but Democrats are saying, well, this is unfair. This is gerrymandering. This has happened at an unusual time, not right after a new census when states will redraw these maps, but coming kind of mid-cycle, as you're saying. But ironic that here we have Governor Pritzker who's been quite vocal in harboring Texas Democrats, preventing them from doing what Republicans say is their legal obligation, and that's to show up and vote on behalf of their constituents in Texas, and harboring them here when Illinois has far more gerrymandered maps than Texas or most other states. And so, Greg, you talked with Regan Deering, state rep. You talked with Cindy Davidsmeyer, state rep, and they used the words hypocrite and hypocrisy when it comes to the governor, when, you know, it'd be one thing if you were in a state that weren't as gerrymandered as Illinois, but to say anything about somebody else drawing quote unquote unfair maps when Illinois maps look the way they do, well, they say that's hypocritical.
And also, I think the word fraud was brought up as Republicans were quick to point out Governor J.B. Pritzker, before he was elected to his first term, promised to only sign a map that was fair and supported the idea of an independent map-making commission to draw fair maps. But obviously that did not happen, as in 2021, after the 2020 census, the governor did indeed sign a map that even Princeton's gerrymandering project gave Illinois an F for. So yeah, the fingers pointing back and forth, the words hypocrite and fraud being used. But you've also got Republicans here in Illinois who, like State Representative Ryan Spain, who has said that, you know, if the governor is heralding these Texas Democrats for using a quorum rule, because that's what's happening here, Jim, right? I mean, the Texas Democrats aren't just avoiding voting on this. They are blocking any activity happening in the Texas House at this moment, because the Texas Republicans don't have a quorum. Now, Illinois also has a quorum rule, but it's not the same rule as Texas. Texas requires 2/3 of the legislative body to be present on that day to do that type of work. But Illinois, it's only a simple majority, so they can have 51% of members there and have a quorum. So Representative Ryan Spain said that if the governor heralds what the Texas Democrats are able to do, blocking legislative activity by fleeing the state and not having a quorum, why not change Illinois' constitution to allow for that type of quorum? And the governor, when I asked him, he seemed to just not really have any opinion about that particular idea, even though it's been filed as official constitutional amendment proposal at the Illinois State House. I mean, that's another angle here, but now we've got the rhetoric that was heating up, Jim. We heard earlier this week about a bomb threat at a hotel where some Texas Democrats were staying. Texas Democrats eventually, safe and no device found. But I mean, the rhetoric's getting up there. Knife to a knife fight, gun to a gun fight, fire with fire. Where do you see this leading?
Well, and Governor Pritzker has been, I don't know if you want to use the word leader, but when it comes to rhetoric, since January 20th, since Donald Trump was elected back into the White House, he has used what many would call violent rhetoric. I mean, you recall his State of the State budget address. How many times did he use the word Nazi? Greg, you counted. I don't even remember how many times, but he used the word Nazi a lot to refer to Donald Trump and his followers. And we've just seen at every press event the governor has, he either goes out of his way actually to verbally blast the president of the United States and people in his administration. So the rhetoric's that's been part of his strategy. It appears to be part of a political strategy nationally. It could be hurting him politically here in Illinois, with news from Illinois Policy Institute, a new poll coming out this week that for the first time shows the governor with an unfavorable rating among Illinoisans. So could the national push and perhaps some of that rhetoric be affecting his standing among people here in Illinois? And, when you look at the numbers, I mean, a lot of people who voted for J.B. Pritzker in 2018 and 2022, I say a lot, perhaps not a lot percentage-wise, but numbers-wise, a significant number then turned and voted for Donald Trump. So, people who may have supported Pritzker in the past, could they now be flipping, or could they have at least flipped for one election? And could Pritzker be damaging himself politically by verbally attacking someone who people who voted for him turned around and voted for in Donald Trump? So it'll be interesting to watch how this all plays out. But obviously we've had, the bomb threat was one thing, but we've had attacks on, going back to a year ago when there were assassination attempts against Trump, and there have been other incidents since the Minnesota fatal shootings. I mean, this it would be nice. A number of people on both sides of the aisle, to be fair, have called for this rhetoric to be tamped down. Governor Pritzker so far has shown no interest. He has continued to be quite strident in his efforts to blast the president and Republicans.
It'd be interesting to see, especially as the governor's approaching, a third term for office, or at least he's hoping to get that third term. But what that polling will mean in the months ahead, up into the primary and even after the primary, all throughout next year to the November election, just how prominent the governor is in the national spotlight. I'm curious if that will actually hurt his favorability even more in Illinois in particular, as Illinois voters may see that as just distasteful, trying to take a national perspective when Illinois is strapped with the highest property taxes in the nation now, according to new analysis. You've got the high, corporate income tax. You've got a whole host of business regulations impacting investments and jobs. So, I think we'll have to keep a close eye on that polling data and how it changes one way or the other in the months ahead. You'll get that story and all of the stories about the gerrymandering debates at thecentersquare.com. So be sure to go check that out, get the newsletter, and get this podcast where you get podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus. It is the weekend edition. I'm Greg Bishop, joined by Jim Talamonte, someone who's been very closely watching the ongoing, and I say ongoing, Jim, because, we could see what happens in the appeals courts with the whole host of cases connected with the ComEd 4 bribery corruption scheme. But what happened earlier this week? The latest chapter to close on the ComEd 4 saga.
Yes, this is a trial which, when you include sentencing and so on, has already been going for more than 2 years. And, it's kind of it may not seem like it at first. It's kind of a natural segue from our last topic, because when it comes to gerrymandering in Illinois, Republicans right now are pointing to Governor Pritzker for not, following his campaign pledge. But gerrymandering goes back not just years, but decades in Illinois. And who was behind a great deal of that gerrymandering? Probably more than anyone else. The most powerful man in the state for many of those years, and that was former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan. Well, as we know, he was convicted and sentenced earlier this year. He's scheduled to report to prison for 7.5 years in October. A trial connected to that, which started before it, and yet is still finally wrapped up with sentencing this past week, was the ComEd 4 case. 4 individuals accused, later convicted, for their roles in a scheme to bribe Madigan. No-show jobs or little to no work jobs for Madigan allies, campaign workers, precinct captains to help win elections in exchange for legislation favorable to ComEd, which led to hundreds of millions of dollars to benefit ComEd. And so you had Madigan's longtime associate, former state rep and lobbyist Michael McLean. You had ComEd lobbyist John Hooker, former ComEd CEO Ann Pramaggiore, and a man named Jay Doherty. People in Chicago may remember him as a city club president at one time. So he was known in Windy City circles for that. He was a visible figure, and his offices at the city club were actually raided in connection with this, what became this trial, the ComEd 4 case. And so Doherty's sentencing was this week, and he got the lightest sentence of the group, 1 year plus 1 day in prison, and the lightest fine. But he was a key person. He was a subcontractor. It was through Doherty that ComEd hired Madigan's allies. And there were some, prosecutors, as with the Madigan case, had all kinds of recordings, videos, emails, just an immense amount of material. And Doherty figured in those, in both cases, Madigan and ComEd 4, as kind of that middleman, arranging things as kind of an ally to the fixers, so that these guys would work for him and he would get paid by ComEd. And so he was convicted this week. Now, again, we don't know if he will appeal. He showed more contrition, it seemed, than most of the others. But he's scheduled to report to prison next month. So it'll be coming up quickly for Jay Doherty.
This is clearly something that you've personally been in the courtroom hearing these, pieces of evidence being brought forward, even hearing Madigan testify himself, and delving into the records of all of this. The appeals process could play out. Madigan has filed an appeal. Is that correct?
Yes, Madigan has appealed. We are expecting any day for McLean. In fact, McLean may have now gone through. And Pramaggiore, the ComEd CEO, she has filed an appeal. So this case, ComEd 4, these convictions came in 2023. So we're talking 2 years ago, more than 2 years. It was May, I believe. And there have been all kinds of reasons for that. One being that we are on our second judge. Manish Shah took over when the previous judge passed away. So it's been a long case, but again, like the Madigan case, advocacy groups and certainly State House Republicans say this is another example of Illinois' ethics laws being too weak. And I talked to Patrick Windhorst, the Metropolis Republican, who said, we've been pushing for years and we need stronger ethics laws to prevent this, because as of now, there's really nothing to prevent this kind of scheme, these kinds of scams from happening again. And Windhorst said it's also important to strengthen the position of legislative inspector general, because right now it's almost as if legislators are overseeing the inspector general, who's supposed to be their watchdog. So it just and on the Democrat side, former Governor Pat Quinn has repeatedly called for ethics reform as well. So it's not just a Republican effort, but the people in power, the Speaker Welch, Senate President Harmon, the governor, and of course, before him, Madigan, they've shown little interest in strengthening Illinois' ethics laws when it comes to politicians and lobbyists and utility companies.
Yeah, exactly right. And you can read more about that and also dig into some of the archival footage from the actual court case, undercover video and audio transcripts of phone calls. I mean, just pretty remarkable. So get all of that at thecentersquare.com. Jim, we're going to be, of course, next week at the Illinois State Fair, and there's going to be plenty of politicking, and we'll talk a lot more about that next week because Wednesday is Governor's Day. A lot of big names. We got Hakeem Jeffries, Congressman, Democrat leader in the U.S. House. He's going to be a keynote speaker. But you also have Republicans Thursday. They've got their big rally day. We'll see who may surface to the top there for Republicans to possibly take on Governor J.B. Pritzker in 2026. But after the state fair, Jim, I think it's probably going to be pedal to the metal on addressing the transit fiscal cliff. This is something that we're going to cover closely at thecentersquare.com because, Jim, there's all kinds of ideas on how they're going to address funding a $760 million fiscal cliff before the end of the year.
Yes, absolutely. And State Senator Ron Villey-Vallam has kind of been the point man in the Senate for transit. And he has said that his proposal for funding is still on the table, even though Republican Senator Don DeWitt said it's dead. And that would involve that delivery tax, that retail delivery tax, which proved to be very unpopular with a lot of Illinois residents. Especially, I think, people outside of the Chicago area, and also unpopular with Illinois realtors and the business community. So that was part of Villey-Vallam's proposal, was that that tax along with other taxes. And Villey-Vallam says any funding plan, he said, we have the governance, and both Villey-Vallam and DeWitt have said this, we have the governance worked out to have some consolidation, avoid the overlap in a lot of these transit agencies, a lot of the bloat, the government bloat that's there. But the funding, according to Villey-Vallam, still has to be $1.5 billion. And I asked him, well, what about people throughout much of the state who just don't use public transit outside of especially the Chicago area and outside of your metropolitan areas? What about rural Illinoisans? They're not going to be using buses and trains very often. He said, well, any funding plan would also have to keep at least $200 million for downstate transit. This is a record number that the state transit agencies wanted. What percentage of residents wanted, I don't know. But so that was his way of saying that this isn't just for Chicago, because we've seen a lot of pushback from the vast majority of the state saying, we don't want to bail out Chicago public schools. We don't want to bail out the Chicago Transit Authority. And we certainly don't want to bail out Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson. So that's what we're looking at. I think a special session, as we're now well into August, is probably looking unlikely. Speaker Welch suggested back in June that we have time. The funding in place is still there till the end of the year. But, the longer we wait, the better a chance that something sneaks in last minute, late night in a shell bill, just like the Illinois budget. And that could be something that proves to be very unpopular. So, but again, given the poll numbers we talked about earlier, the politics are also a part of this. You have to think with, by the time we get to that fall session, the next round of state elections will be just over a year away.
You're exactly right. And I think one of the big pushbacks about the original idea of that retail delivery tax was people downstate not taking mass transit in the Chicagoland area shouldn't be paying $1.50 per retail delivery in order to pay for mass transit's overspending. That's not going to necessarily be a winning political message for those seeking re-election heading into 2026.
Yeah, it could really hurt, quite a few people around the state if they impose this tax. And Lou Sandoval, Illinois Chamber of Commerce president and CEO, said this is a regressive tax. So seniors who depend on these deliveries for their pharmaceuticals, for their medications, students on fixed income, maybe in small college towns or out away from the cities, they need things delivered sometime. Maybe students who are trying to pay off a student loan and they don't have something they need from home. They need something delivered from a business. That this is something that they get charged the same amount, that $1.50, as somebody orders a $5,000 something that's a more luxurious type item, shall we say. So that's one of the arguments against this. And I think that, like you said, if this were to be passed, if that still were to be a part of this, well, the people who vote for that, who are in these kinds of districts outside of Chicago and the immediate Chicago area, well, that's going to be a big campaign issue.
Again, one of the stories we're going to continue to track here at thecentersquare.com. Something else, Jim, I'm every Friday around this time of the year, I get the stuff buttoned up for the weekend thinking, all right, we're going to head off to the weekend. But around 4:30, like clockwork, we get an email from the governor's office announcing that could be dozens of bills, could be several dozen bills. As it was Friday, 124 bills were announced, signed. And we quickly get that out for people to understand just how the legislative process works. More than 450 bills the legislature passed in spring session. He's still got about 300 bills on his desk, and we're expecting a lot more activity with new laws coming into place. But last Friday, signed another 124 bills impacting everything from buses, requiring seatbelts on school buses after 2031, reclassifying electric bicycles as low-speed bicycles. You also have impacts on artificial intelligence. But Jim, in the 4 minutes we've got left here, there's a lot to say about the measure the governor signed, boosting the tier 2 of Chicago police and fire pensions.
Yes, there has been some back and forth between Governor Pritzker and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson about this. This tier 2 pension bill is it's going to enhance benefits for tier 2 retirees. It's also going to add to Chicago's unfunded pension liabilities, which right now that number is over $36 billion. This would add, city officials estimate, another $11 billion or so to that number. So we're talking about a huge additional payment Chicago is certainly not prepared to make given the city's dire financial situation. So Brandon Johnson said, well, we really didn't want this without progressive revenue attached to it. This wasn't, we needed to have progressive revenue. We've been in conversations about this for 2 years with the state legislature. Governor Pritzker said this week at the state fair, when asked about it, he said, well, the mayor never once called me to tell me that he opposed this bill or to ask for any kind of change in this bill.
How is that possible? Johnson was asked about this measure like a week before the governor signed the bill. And you would think there would have been some kind of communication between the two, especially how Johnson responded to that question, saying it's an incomplete bill.
It's really remarkable. And, the bill at this point had already been, and the mayor did say, he said it was a veto-proof majority. I understand the governor was in a tough spot when he signed it, but you would think still that he might have reached out. And I'm sure the mayor's critics at City Hall and the city council would say, well, this needed to be figured out before the legislature passed it. The mayor again, as we've seen time and time again with financial issues, he's late to the game. And so again, you would think someone from the mayor's office would have called the governor's office and said, hey, can we have a conversation about this? Can we even have a veto and figure it out in veto session to add some kind of progressive revenue the mayor wants? So apparently nobody from the mayor's office reached out. And so, in the political back and forth, certainly the governor comes out, helping police and fire. The mayor comes out again, looking like he's late to the game.
Got the Illinois State Fair. It's going to be in full swing throughout this weekend. $140 million in taxpayer funding for the infrastructure out there. It's going to be a jam-packed, wall-to-wall agricultural expo in Springfield, Jim. So if you get down here, I'll take you on a tour.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to see that butter cow, and I'd like to see that budget item, see how much that costs. But hopefully we get a lot of people from out of state to pump some more money into our economy to pay for that multi-million-dollar deal.
Yeah, it's something else. All right, so that's all we've got here. Thank you for joining us for Illinois in Focus. Again, you can find the podcast where you get podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus, and it's right here with The Center Square. You can keep up with these stories and more at thecentersquare.com.